All right, we are here with Coach DJ Connor. Thanks for doing this with me. New coach at Orem High School, your alma mater, we'll call it that. So what is it like coaching at your high school?
You know, it's interesting because, my dad was a high school coach for 40 years, and looking back, it's something I never wanted to do. My dad made a lot of sacrifices. To me, the best dad in the world. I got to be in the gym with this guy all the time. But I saw that, there were some sacrifices he made of not being with my sisters or at dance competitions or cheer. And so he missed a lot of those things. And I didn't want to do that. That was not something that I kind of had on my radar to coach in high school. I love basketball. I love playing basketball, but it was something that just probably wasn't on my mind. And then opportunity came up a couple years ago at Mountain View at the time. I tried to get this other guy to take it because I live in Mountain View Boundaries. I still live in Mountain View Boundaries, and the youth is amazing there. And so I tried to get this guy to take it. He wouldn't. I got talked into coaching and took an interview, and I never really had an interview in my life. I've kind of been in sales or, kind of done the entrepreneur thing. So I go in there and, get in a suit and, answer all the questions, and I walked out of there pretty confident, thinking, I think I might get this job. And a couple of days later, their AD called me and ended up getting the job. So then I stepped right into this thing a couple of years ago at Mountain View, and I loved my time at Mountain View. And so when this opportunity came up at Orem High, I just thought, hey, I'd probably go back home, and it's where my dad coached for 12 years. It's where I got to play with some of my best friends and teammates for 3 years, and so it was a tough decision to make because Orem and Mountain View, if you know, they're rivals, but I'm super excited for the opportunity here at Orem.
Were you coaching before Mountain View, maybe not high school, but other teams? Like, were you in the coaching world?
Yeah, I've always kind of been around the youth side of things. So after I served an LDS mission, came home, my dad was here at Orem. I helped a little bit with the sophomore and JV, in the mid 2000, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I loved it. I loved coaching. And then my son, I got 2 girls who were older, then I got a little boy, and started doing the junior jazz thing with him, and then got into this crazy club world when he was about in 2nd grade. And so started some clubs. We have a basketball club called Real Athlete Club that we do, through Utah County. So I've always coached, just never in high school.
Yeah. And this actually came up on our Instagram. A coach had mentioned something about he's going for his first head coaching job, and the podcast kind of helped him understand how to go through that process. And so the question for you is, like, specific to this Orem job, a lot of coaches applied for it, and a lot of pretty well-known coaches applied for it. So what do you think during the interview process stood out in what you could offer Orem?
It's interesting because, I tell this to people from a resume standpoint, from some of these guys that were applied, they're 10 times better than me from a resume standpoint. And I think what happened was there was a lot of things that I probably checked a lot of boxes that maybe Orem was looking for. One, a community feel. I played here. My dad coached here. A lot of my friends and their kids go here. And then I think the one thing that I've done really well with, not from just coaching high school basketball, but the thing that's shifted over the last 10 years is the youth inside these communities. At Mountain View, we started a club inside of our Mountain View Boundaries called The View. And we had the second biggest youth club that was associated with the high school, almost 28 teams that I did with Jessica Milgate, the girls coach. And so, when you look at all those boxes that they were looking for, of who's going to bring, a community feel, who has a little bit experience, who can run a youth program and build that up from a community standpoint, those were the things. And who's passionate. And, and I think they took a little gamble on me, just as Mountain View did 2 years ago. And so, but those guys who, maybe didn't get the job, they'll land on their feet, and some of them already have. But I was extremely grateful that Orem decided to kind of go with me.
How hard is that to leave a program with your boys at Mountain View and come to a new one for a job that, again, it's your high school? Like, I can't blame anybody for taking that, but that seems like that'd be a hard separation.
It's extremely hard. And, I'll just tell you a quick story. So 28 years ago, when I was a freshman a freshman over at Lakers Junior High. In Utah County, we don't go to high school till we're sophomores. And so back then, kind of every freshman just played for their junior high. And I was always going to go to Mountain View. I lived in Mountain View boundaries, but my dad actually was the sophomore coach at Orem, who he coached with a guy named Greg Scheide, who was actually my high school coach. But my first friends, ever, when I moved to Utah after my parents got divorced in 8th grade were, the Henrys. And they're Mountain View legends. You go into Mountain View, they got state championships through girls basketball, boys basketball. One of their brothers was Mr. Basketball. I grew up going to the games at Mountain View, wanting to play there. And towards the end of, 9th grade year, what happens is you start to go translate to, high school. And my same buddy, Dan Henry, called me up. This was April of that time. We're getting ready to go play sophomore basketball. He calls me up and he says, "Hey, you're going to go to practice?" And I was like, "Dude, what practice?" And I immediately knew right then I was on the B team. And I didn't feel like a B team player at the time, and maybe that's where they saw me. And so I kind of flipped that switch that day and told my dad, I said, "Hey, I'm actually going to come to Orem." And so it was all my friends. I had great friends there, and a guy named Puck Hereford and Dan Henry, and all my buddies, my best friends were going there, except I had another great friend, Chet Cusick, who was so pumped that I was decided to go to Orem. And so, going through high school, we didn't have like cell phones or social media. And so when you went to high school, those were your friends. And for 3 years in playing high school basketball, I was a hated person at Mountain View. And I hated Mountain View at the time. We'd have to go play all these Salt Lake schools. So we'd take the bus ride from Orem High down Center Street to get on the freeway to go play the Salt Lake schools. And, I tell the story, and, looking back, it's probably bad, but, we would hit the rec center on State Street, and, somebody would say, "Hey, birds up." And, as punk kids, we would all hold up our middle fingers from about the start of Mountain View to the, right after about 3-4 seconds. And that's how much, we didn't like it. And they didn't love me. And so, they would make chants at me of like, "Hey, DJ's in, we're going to win." And so it was unique. And I loved that aspect of it. And so fast forward, 25 years later that you ask of, how hard that was again, growing up, or going through, my adulthood, and my kids go there. The truth is I loved Mountain View. When I took that job, I was all in on Mountain View. Unfortunately, some of the players that were great transferred right before I got the job, who were, still awesome kids. And so we had to really rebuild the program. And I'm telling you, the heart of Mountain View and some of these kids that gave everything was awesome. The coaching staff that we brought on. And so, 2 years later, I'm sitting in that same decision as I did, 28 years ago. Like, am I going to leave Mountain View to go to Orem? And my wife was like, "Don't do it. Like, dude, you're going to be hated again." And I thought to myself, you're probably right. And for whatever reason was, it just is drawing to me. Like I said, my dad coached there, and I didn't want to coach high school basketball. So a year into my first year coaching high school basketball, my dad died, had a stroke, and his last game he got to watch about 2 weeks before he passed away. You got to watch his son coach something he did for 40 years, and so now coming back home, it's a little bit meaningful to me. But I can assure you, I didn't make some people, probably frustrated at me, maybe even dislike me. But the hardest part was the kids. Parents, they're going to love you. They're not going to like you. But the kids, that was hard. And one of the things I wanted to do is I made sure I sat down with those kids individually at times and told them how much I loved them and tried to, walk through it with them. And you got, we played Mountain View this year, on December 11th. And you got guys like, Ryder Draper, who's, texting me, "I'm dropping 40 on you." A kid like Aiden Peterson, who's a great golfer. I'm just excited to play these guys. But, my time is Orem is now, and it was not easy, but I've loved it so far.
Yeah. And so I help at Riverton. We actually got to play Mountain View last year.
Yep.
And a very intense, exciting game
Oh yeah,
where you got
one-time Mike, one-time Mike
got the better of us. But the perception that I have of your team is they played so hard. And I know that there's always things that are happening behind the scenes, but it seems like your kids were just bought into, we're going to play so hard and we're going to play together and we're just going to find a way to make it happen, even if we're smaller than another team or outsized or whatever. So how do you build a team around that? How do you select the players that you can see? And is there a balance between, okay, this player may be more talented but isn't fully bought in versus this player is fully bought in and might supersede a more talented player?
I think a little bit has to do with some of like how I played, and the difference is I was on a very, very good basketball team, growing up. And so you had to kind of find your role that you had. And my role was very simple. Don't turn it over. Pass to guys like Chet Cusick, Pat Thomas, Johnny Harleen, Steve Stewart, and go guard the best guy unless he was the center. And that was my role. And so I only could give effort. That's how I really found an opportunity to play in high school. And, we went all the way and lost in the state championship my senior year. And so for me, effort is everything. Effort is everything. I can give a little bit of lack of talent. You can miss some shots, but if you choose not to give effort, you won't play for Orem High, and you definitely won't play for me. And I think that is defined by the practices that you give. I think it's defined by your captains, because they have to lead out. Because if you have all four guys out there and that are playing their butts off, and there's a loose ball, and you decide not to go get that, you can feel bad about that. And your teammates are going to let you know, hey, bro, we got to have you. You've got to give everything. And I just believe that little bit of effort and how you play can translate farther than a lot of things. It can lead to a steal. It can lead to a layup. It could lead to an offensive rebound. And those points add up. It might not be on your stat line, but you got it. You passed it to this guy, and he made the shot. And so, I think that is a huge estimated thing that high school players. You give effort or you won't play.
Well, and we tried to emphasize that too. I think we lost 7 games by one possession last year. And so it's like one possession can make such a big difference. How do you enforce that, whether that's in practice or in games, of if you notice someone not giving effort? Is that yelling and screaming? Is that playing time? How do you enforce that philosophy?
Yeah, I think, always the best teacher is probably the bench. Because I believe kids, they want to go play in front of these crowds. They want to go play for their parents. And I think it starts, how you warm up pregame, what's your mentality like, what type of kid you are. And I think from the very get-go, from the coaches and the coaches' energy and the captains, is we just demand it. We just demand it. The only time you'll ever see me get real mad, I'm a confidence guy. You go out there, you're open, you shoot it. Where I get the most frustrated is if lack of effort. And so, from an energy standpoint, I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to be pumped up. I'm going to be loud, and I'm going to get you motivated to do it. And I just believe those things will translate on an energy on the court, but they will also translate when you have lack of it. And then you guys say, hey, where are you, bro? Like, get out here. Like, give me something more. Or just come sit on the bench if you don't got it. And then they'll look at me, and I tell these kids, because I respect them, hey, when you're ready, holler at me. And they're ready. And now they got to go back in there, and they know, that there's a loose ball, I'm diving on it. So you just demand it.
How do you go about building a new program? Because now this is the second in, call it 3 years of, when I started, it was a panic attack of there is so much to cover. And now you're bringing it to a new school. There is so much to just, what are our principles? What are our pillars and all of this stuff? How do you go about building that?
So in 2 years ago, when I sat with the interview at Mountain View, I thought it was just coaching high school varsity basketball. And I tell this to people, if they would have told you everything you have to do as a high school, I don't teach, I run a couple of businesses. If they would have told me everything I'd have to do to run a high school program, I can assure you 100% I would have turned the job down. Because there's everything from budgets to running a youth program to maintaining parents to scheduling. to practices 2.5 hours a day, to spring league, to summer leagues, to fall leagues. I mean, this is a year job. And so, to now learn all those mistakes, and not to say that Mountain View was the guinea pig of all that, but there was so many mistakes that were made in those first couple of years, and there's going to be thousands of mistakes after, but you just try to eliminate those as time goes on. And so rebuilding something at Orem, and not that I'm rebuilding anything, Orem has been a powerhouse for 10, 15 years, and they've had some amazing coaches. Even the Jace TV the last 4 or 5 years here, go look at what they've done. And so I'm just trying to come in on this team now and just build it from the youth up. And so all of those things to start over at this point, we got to reorder jerseys. I got to talk kids who didn't want to play anymore into coming to play. I got to go build a youth program. I got to invite, hire new coaches, because some stayed, some came with me. And then you got to get the kids to buy into who's this DJ guy. Some kids know me, some kids don't. And so, maybe they don't love my personality. And so you got to get them, because they loved the last year's coach, some of these guys. And so, do I trust this guy? So you got to go build all this trust back with the parents, the players, the admin. So it's tough. But, we're willing to put that energy into it and see what we can do and try to be better at than what we've been in the past.
Yeah, and it seems like a skill that successful coaches have to have is they have to be able to build that trust quickly.
Yep.
And especially with teenage kids, right? And so you brought up the staff. How do you go about selecting your staff? And then what roles and responsibilities do you delegate to your staff because of all of the thousands of things you have to do as a program?
Yeah. No, I'll say this. And I believe this in life. I believe that, maybe I'm a good person, maybe I'm a good coach, but I am absolutely nothing without the team around me. That's with my family, my wife, my kids, my friends. And then if you translated that to high school basketball, it's the staff. One of the things that got advice from year one was, I'm not an X's and O's guy. I'm an energy guy. And so the first thing I thought was I got to go find this expert on X's and O's, and he's going to teach me things and all this stuff. And my buddy who's coaching high school, he gave me great advice. He's like, go find people that are loyal to you, that will get your back, because it's a thankless job in a sense. And then you got to think, well, if you go bring in a new coach and maybe you don't do good, is that new coach who might be smarter than you in X's and O's? Is he trying to get your job? Oh, hey, I don't know if DJ can get this job done, but I can. That happens, and you can see that. So for me, it was super important for get people around me who loved basketball, who loved kids, who were passionate about it. And I'm an easy, and I can say this probably better than anybody, I'm an easy coach to be an assistant for, because I give my coaches full trust. Go ask some of these Mountain View coaches, they'll grab a clipboard at timeout and just be like, hey, I got it. And I'm sitting in the back. I'm not even in the huddle on these things, because I fully trust this, because I don't have that ego. Because if you see something, say something. And so we brought in guys. One of them was JJ Holt, one of my best friends for 20 years. TG Wesley was another one, played at Provo High School. We were rivals back in the day. You're never going to find someone who loves kids more than TG. And then Kelly McCarty, another guy I met 20 years ago. 2 young kids, Cooper and Zach Nelson. These guys are 20, 22 years old. They're gym rats. You want to go shoot in the morning at 6 a.m. or stay out at night? Those are the guys you call. I got a family. I'm not getting up at 6 a.m. and going to teach you some skills. I will. But I think that fine balance of that staff means every single thing. And so we've tried to do that. We brought a couple guys from Mountain View with us, and we hired this really other great guy named Marcus Whippy, who's kind of been around high school basketball, and he's a great trainer. And so, we're still looking for one more, but I think staff is everything. They make me look good, and I get the credit because that's my name as the head coach. But I will never take credit for how well we do. It will always be my staff.
What are you most excited for this year one at Orem, with the guys that are here?
To win it. To win state championship my first year. Orem High, as much history as they've had, they've only won one state championship, in their 75 years. 2012, my buddy Dalton Nixon. And I'm a competitive guy. and having that little taste of some success that we had at Mountain View. We did some things at Mountain View that haven't been done in 10 plus years. We upset one of my buddies, Mark Miller, at Cottonwood in the second round. They weren't happy, and then we almost beat Dixie in the quarters. And so getting back to Weber State and having the kids, taste that, it got me energized to being like, I want to win it now. And so one of the things that you asked is, what are some of the expectations, or what do I want to do? I want to win it my first year, and I want the kids to understand that is possible, because anything can happen in high school basketball. And so for us, it's to win it, to create a culture that's long lasting, and that kids want to be a part of this program.
It's so you made it to the state championship game as a player. So
Yeah.
what do you think it takes that most people don't understand to actually get that far, to even get to the opportunity to have that game? It feels like a lot has to go right. And my dad would always say, to win a championship, you do need a little bit of luck. And people have their own feelings on luck, but things have to bounce your way sometimes.
They really do. And, even our year in 2001 with some of my friends and teammates, I mean, we almost got upset in the second round, and we thought that was a surefire win versus this Layton team. And then we did really well in the semis, and we were driving up to the state championship thinking that, dude, we're going to be state champions here in about 5-6 hours. Ended up losing to awesome team West Jordan by 3. But I believe it does take a little bit of luck. But I believe you have to be in the opportunities to give you that little bit of luck. And especially like in 4A basketball, one of the disadvantages is, and I hope the state can fix this, and it's probably they won't be able to, we have to go play St. George schools. That means a 4-hour drive if you get them in a first or second round. And we did that my first year. We had to go play Desert Hills. We had to go there, travel there in one day, play Desert Hills. We ended up losing. And so one of the things that we got a little bit lucky on is we played Stansbury in our first round. We hosted a game, but our second round game was just 30 minutes down the road at Cottonwood rather than going to play Dixie or Snow Canyon down there. And so that fell into our hands, a little bit of luck. And then your kids got to play well. So not only lucky, but all the discipline and all the confidence, and just see what happens. I always say this: if you're in the state title or you're in the state tournament games, anything can happen. You've seen what the last couple of years of some of these huge upsets. Like 2 years ago, Orem got upset in the quarterfinals. Last year, the number 17 team in the nation lost to Alta in a first round game.
Yeah.
No one thought that, but Alta just made a bunch of shots. And sometimes that just happens.
And it's interesting with the state tournament runs that are involved with you and these teams of, there's a quote that's, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your training. And so I think to your point too, when you're getting in a new gym and you're getting in a bigger environment, to make sure that your kids, the training is there first before like thinking I'll magically rise to this big occasion. But that's super cool. Take me through tryouts and how you kind of manage and run tryouts. What are you looking for? What do you put the kids through to pull out the talent and the skills that you're looking for a team?
It's hard because, you have to follow these rules, and you can't cut kids until basically the tryouts, the third day of it. And so you go play in spring, you go play in summer, you go play in these fall, and it's an equal opportunity for everybody. And so the advantage you have is you technically get to see a lot of these kids throughout the year and then see how they play, see how they interact with anybody. But when it comes to tryouts, I always tell you it's a clean slate. How hard you go and how you play and the effort you give, you can find a way to be on a team, whether that's a sophomore team, a JV team, or even a varsity team. And so what we do at tryouts and throughout that is we constantly preach effort. Like you go back to one of your first questions, well, what are your expectations? Effort. If you can't give effort, then I won't be able to teach you things. I won't be able for you, because effort will go into how you run an offense. Effort will go into how you play defense, how you guard your guys, how do you prepare. All of that can take effort. And so when we go to tryouts, we try to do a little bit of skill work. We try to do a little bit of up and down the court, test them a little bit, mix up teams. How are they when they're not on a good team? How are they when they're on a really good team? And then just see collectively from a culture standpoint, is this guy a good fit? And, unfortunately, that's the worst part about this job. I hate cutting kids because you are kind of wrecking some dreams that they envisioned when they were in 4th, 5th, 5th, 6th grade, that I want to play high school basketball. And sometimes you can't do that for them. So it's tough.
So I coach my son, he's 11, and I did this with that team. I said, how many of you have a goal of making a high school team? And they all raised their hand. And that's why this podcast exists, is for the little kids, so they know what coaches are looking for. I said, how many of you want to play college? And they all raised their hand. They're like, how many of you want to play in the NBA? And they all raised their hand. So I was like, as a coach, I feel like it's our job as a coach is everybody at some point in their life is going to get the news that you're just not good enough to play. And I think us as coaches, all we want to do is push that date out as far as we possibly can for these kids. And some of it will be after a sophomore year. Some of them will be after a varsity year. But that's such a tough and emotional thing. The hardest thing in my life I've ever had to do was fire someone from a work perspective. But then like cutting is that same feeling of you just hate it.
It's hard because you see the emotion that they feel like their dream's over. And, the reality is it's not. Very few get to play high school basketball. And then, like me, that was it. My dream died when we lost the state title. I didn't get to go play, college or NBA. I wasn't even close to that. But I did believe that. I thought I was going to play at North Carolina 100%. I thought I was going to start with my buddy from, growing up, Jeff Berry, and we thought we were going to be awesome over there. So, but I'm also the coach that if you want to talk to me, talk to me. And I want to be transparent with you. Here's what I saw. This year might have too many 2028 kids. And so you got to look at that 2 years ahead and saying, well, I can't keep 11 juniors because you're going to get cut the following year. So you try to get ahead a little bit that. And, especially with all these, transfers that, come in and out of different schools, you just don't know until you show up to tryouts of how many kids you got. And so you want to be loyal to the ones that have been around, your high school program for years, and even the youth. Because I'm a huge guy. I'm not a fan of recruiting. Like, I'm not. But I'm also not against transfers. We've had some transfers come help us at Mountain View. We didn't recruit them, but we gave them opportunities that they might not have had at some of their bigger schools or even smaller schools. And that they helped us win, and they were great teammates and stuff like that. So finding that kind of balance in high school now is very tough. When you see new kids and they want to come, but again, if you're constantly over recruiting the players that you have, I think it's destined to not do well.
Yeah, it kind of leads me to another question too. Of Orem is a football powerhouse, and so the transfers may not necessarily be coming here because of basketball. They're coming here for something else, but they also play basketball. So how do you deal with multi-sport athletes in your program, especially with all the spring, summer, fall tournaments?
Yeah, no, it's hard because, football's priority in the summer. And, you got to have a good relationship with your other coaches at your high school. Orem High just got a brand new football coach. And I knew the last year's football coach, one of my buddies, Lance Reynolds, good guy. They got a new football coach, Andy Stokes. And sometimes people want to go play for that coach, and they're out here. They're going to probably win another state title. And the advantage that we have here at Orem High basketball is that dual sport athlete, because I'm a huge fan of playing multiple sports. Some of these guys will tell you, you got to specialize in one. I would love everybody just to play basketball. There's no doubt in my mind I get more time in the gym with them in the summer and the fall. But some of these guys were going to go play, D1 football. And so their lives are going to be better because of football. And so to navigate that from a standpoint of basketball, I can't wait till they show up, because these football kids are, one, tough. They're going to be out of shape when they come back. There's no doubt in our mind. But they're big. So the football, gets a couple of these transfer kids who I didn't even talk to, that now we're coming to play basketball. So it's a huge advantage for us if you have a really good football team. And so that was another one that I took into consideration of taking this job.
That football definitely brings a level of toughness and tenacity. Totally. I think if you can have that, but all the sports translate, I think, in interesting ways. What is your approach to parents, right? Because you're going to have 30 kids in your program across all the levels, and not all of them want to start varsity, but not all of them can. You only get 5. So how do you deal with playing time discussions, or at least skill discussions, and the interactions with parents and their kids?
Another thing, that they don't tell you about is, how many parent discussions you're going to have as a high school coach. And growing up, I think, 25, 28 years ago, each high school kid had to adapt to their coach. I got to play for Greg Scheide here. He is the best guy I know. Me and my teammates and our coach Scheide, we're on a text message the last 7 years. He'll send us pictures of him fishing, and we'll talk about families and stuff. And so I loved it. We had to adapt to him. The way he coached, and he was hard on us, and we all had to figure our personalities and adapt to that coach. I believe that's flipped now. And I think the coaches that are figuring that out are finding success. Not because I have to go personally figure out each one of these kids, but I mentally and how to talk to the kids, each one of them is different. And so I could coach this kid very, very hard, but I can't do it with this other kid. And you have to find that balance. And so what happens is when you go really hard at one kid and then you go very hard at another kid who could take it, the parents now might see, well, dude, you're messing up my kid. And so they want to go have a conversation with you. And so some advice I got is, I try to put a 24-hour rule. Some parents don't love that because the emotions of a game or whatever, it's just like, hey, can we talk right after the game? Because maybe they felt like I went hard at their kid. And so you try to establish all of those things in the preseason parent meeting of, hey, here's my rules on how I deal with parents. But I can tell you right now, I'm not afraid to talk to parents. That is the one thing that I told myself from the very get-go. I'll have hard conversations. I got a buddy who I went to junior high with, and his son is over at Mountain View, one of my favorite kids in the world. And we've had tough conversations over 2 years. And there's been tons of times where he hasn't probably loved the way that I've done things. But we'll jump on a call and we'll spend an hour and a half, and he'll see it my way, I'll see it his way. At the end of the day, he knows I love him. He knows I love his kid. And, we'll move on. But I just don't believe you can shy away from these parents. They're a part of high school basketball program. You got to find a way to deal with them.
It does seem, to your point of back when I was there, it's kind of like you dealt with the coach in front of you. But now it seems like parents and admin have so much more, like if something isn't handled the right way, then they can kick that coach out pretty quickly and pretty easily.
Yeah. That
we've seen over the last few years. So I think that's a tough balance to you of like, how do you hold your team accountable?
Yeah.
But also in a way that everybody is still on the same page and not fighting each other.
Well, and I think that's super important. And I tell this, and it's the same way I'll talk to my kid, Brixton, is, maybe I'm his coach, maybe I'm not his coach. But at the end of the day, I tell these parents, I want to have a relationship with your kid that I want them to come talk to me. Now, if I shun them away and this kid comes, hey, coach, how do I get more playing time? Oh, I'll just work harder. And, that's just a generic thing. And I don't sit down with this kid and talk to him. Then I believe the parent can come say, hey, dude, my kid came and talked to you like a man and you shun him away. So now I got to step in. Because I believe if the coach can have a relationship with the kid and just say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Maybe it's the effort in practice. Maybe it's, hey, you just keep having tons of turnovers, or any of all these other things that might come up, is that way the kid should go back to his parents and be like, this is what the coach is saying for me. Okay, great. Because if the kid's not going back and talking to his parents, all the parent sees is an hour and a half basketball game. They don't see the 15 hours a week that we put in with the kid who might not be hustling, who might be last in the conditioning lines, who might not be giving the effort. They don't see that. That's why it's important, one, to establish it with the kid. And then outside of that, you have to be aligned with the player, the parents, the admin, your coaching staff. They all got to align. And I believe that's just communication tool and transparency. And if you're not afraid of that, I think you can eliminate a lot of those problems that might come up.
It's so interesting too, the motivations behind those three groups, right? Of players, parents, admin, and then the coach, throw in the coaches, right? Of you would think we all have the same goal in mind of winning a state championship,
Yep.
which I think we all do. But then it's like how you get there. Everybody has their opinion on
Totally.
how you can get there and
Yep.
and get through all that. Do you think that you mentioned your career is kind of in sales and entrepreneurship? Do you think that has helped you with those hard conversations? Because I'm kind of a people pleaser.
Yeah.
And those are hard, and I've learned that I have to have those, but. Do you think there's a skill set, or what advice would you give to those who are people pleasers that don't like those tough conversations?
Yeah, I'm not a huge controversy guy. Like I don't like having those conflicting, conversations, but sometimes they're needed. They're very big needed in this aspect because kids maybe think different than how you think. So being in sales and doing the door-to-door thing, over when I was first married, everybody has a different personality. Everybody has different needs. And so everybody struggles with different things. And so I just learned on a very early on age of just talk. Dude, look, we can get through anything. It's the same thing with how I feel with my kids, my wife, my friends. Hey, if there's issues, let's just talk about them. And if it takes 5 minutes, takes an hour, if you care about that person, you'll spend the time. And, if you communicate and be transparent on both sides, tell me the things I suck at. I'm fine with kids coming at me and parents saying I stink at things. Great. Maybe I'll get better. Maybe I'll take that. Maybe I won't. But I think sometimes it's good to get it off the chest. And so I think all of those things kind of, running a business and dealing with like different personalities have helped. Saying that I'm not going to shy away from these kids and wanting them to know that I love them, because that's the number one thing. And I hope that in my short time for 2 years at Mountain View, each one of those seniors or anybody who's played for myself or with our coaches, man, I just hope you know that we love you. It might not be easy at times, but I hope you know we loved you.
And it seems like, I don't even know where I heard this, but in any sort of a disagreement, people can either take that as a contest, like I need to win this argument, or you see it as almost like a knot, and we're going to untie this knot together. Like it's a knot, it's not a deal breaker. Like we can untie this together and talk through things. And I really like how that was phrased. Take me through, like, again, going back to, all right, you've got to implement a new offense, a new defense, all of these procedures, out of bounds plays, all of this stuff. And so are there things that you take with you from your coaching experience that are consistent regardless of your personnel? And then are there things that you kind of have to adapt to the personnel that you have as well?
Yeah, I think every single year, and this is where I may be different from other coaches. I get asked this question all the time, like, what's your basketball philosophies? And, and I'm thinking, well, there's a huge difference between philosophies and standards. I'm not an X's and O's savant. And there's people out there. I make this joke all the time just to my buddies is I got some of the greatest friends who coach high school basketball. And I'm generally probably too sarcastic at times. There's been people who coach 25 years, and you know some of these guys. You add them all up, and they got 60, 70 years worth of coaching high school basketball. And I say this, I said, I have just as many state championships as all those guys combined, and I've done it for 2 years. We don't have any. Not because those guys have failed as coaches, because they have translated to amazing kids and all this stuff. It's hard to win a state title. And they have unique philosophies, and they have, this is how I do it. Me, I look at personality, and not to say this is the right way or the wrong way. I look at personalities. Are we big? Are we small? Are we fast? Are we slow? Are we young? Are we old? Can these kids get concepts? From my first year to second year, it was very, very different. From my second year to third year coming over here, it's going to be different. And we're constantly implementing things that might work or not work. But for me, it all comes down to standards. How's your attitude? How's your effort? Are you teachable and are you coachable? And if all of those things can align up, we can get these kids in a room. We can execute on the things that we put on the whiteboard or what we implement in practice, and we can go out there and win. Doesn't mean we're going to win every single game, and doesn't mean that we're not going to switch up different things, but I'm not going to live and die by this is my philosophy and this is my system, and I'm never breaking that. Because I believe you got to lose your little bit of pride in that side of things, because there's great coaches who've never won. There's coaches who get fired after winning a state title and getting fired the next year, and it's like, what? He's a bad coach? No, maybe he got lucky or the kids bought in or he had the best players. So for me, it comes down to standards versus philosophy. And that's where I go lean back on my coaches. If you see something that I can't see, let's draw it up. If our offense sucks or our defense sucks, let's change it. And I'm not going to go live and die by my pride in basketball.
That was a question I had for you specifically is, at what point does it trigger, like, okay, we're ready to change this, right? If we never put in an offense or a defense that we don't think will be successful, but then we implement it and it's not quite going how we want, or we're new or whatever. At what point is it like, okay, we've been at this for 4 months and it's not working, so let's change something? Or is it that first game, man, that didn't work, let's scrap it? Like, how do you make that decision of what you stick through and keep pushing versus scrap it and let's move to something else?
This is a learning thing. So my first year, we had a bunch of stuff. And and anybody who watched our first year versus our second year, we definitely made adjustments. We were switching things all the time. We felt like, hey, this is awesome in practice. We're killing it. Our varsity's crushing our JV, and that's a thing that sometimes it's hard to see. So we think it works, and we get in the games, and let's try this little press. And they'd get 2 layups. All right, we're done. And we look at these guys, we stink. Let's get out of this, and then we just give up on it. And so I think, how long do you give it? How much do you implement? And then are the kids buying into it? Because if the kids can't figure out how to do it, what you're trying to explain, then maybe it's not clicking. You got to get out of it. Because that goes back to that kind of the personnel side of things. And so you want to give it enough to where you say you gave it a go on some of the stuff. And then once it doesn't work, you scrap it. Like, we're just moving on. But again, it goes back down to your standards of some of the other stuff you do.
It's so funny that you mentioned that and another thing that I'm trying to figure out how to help the kids the best way is, to your point of the varsity looks so good when they're playing the JV team, and even some of that JV team, they're playing with the varsity too. So now you're getting sophomores.
Yes.
And so it's like they look great in practice, but then they go to a varsity game and everything is so much bigger, faster, stronger than what they were used to in practice. So they're missing shots they normally make because it's faster or they don't have the time. So what can you do to help your team recreate game-like situations in a practice setting, and also the size, physicality, and strength that comes with that upper level when your lower level kids might not have that to give?
So this is maybe an advantage to us. And again, I don't think we're breaking any rule. Maybe cut this out if we're not. But our coaches love basketball. Like we had a coaching staff, and I always joke around with people, especially last year in Mountain View. Our coaching staff would be any other coaching staff 5-on-5 basketball. I should do a tournament like that. So what we would do in certain situations is our coaches, Zach, Cooper, TG, Kelly, JJ, they go put a jersey on. These are big bodies, 40-year-old men to 20-year-old men, and that changes a little bit of the physicality things, because you can't replicate that sometimes, like you mentioned, with sophomores. It's hard because they look so good, and then they get in the games like, hey, how come this is not working? Well, you're not guarding a 15-year-old, who's 125 pounds. You're now guarding a senior who's 17, 18 years old. Of course, he's faster, stronger. He's getting there on defense and blocking you and stuff like that. And so, I think you try to find ways in practices like that.
Mm-hmm. Do you still get in and play? Do you play with the boys?
Yeah. I always I've said this to people, and my buddies know this. To play up and down, I can be fine. I'm still unbelievable passer. Nobody can pass like me. And I'm in game situations, whatever. But I've never lost to a high school kid in a shooting competition.
There you go.
So anybody out there wants to come try it, let's do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because the same thing, I'll get in there and play as well, especially if we're going against a team and they've got a 6'6" guy that's big and strong, and I'm not 6'6", but we don't have anyone else that can replicate that, but I can push it around, and I'm old and fat. But it's funny because like half court stuff, I feel fine. If they move so fast.
Courts are big.
Those kids
these days
are so fast.
I remember the courts being this big.
They just have unlimited energy. How do you separate your self-worth as a human and as a coach from your record?
It's hard. I'm a competitive guy, and one of the other things that they don't tell you about is how much you think about losses after you take a loss. I mean, it took me so long to get over that Dixie game, just because we were so close. But not even that. It was the Provo losses that Chris and they smacked us a couple times. And I always believed going into this, because I'm an optimistic guy, we can beat anybody. But as we kind of talked before all this, is sometimes you're going to get your butt kicked. And okay, great. You might think that you're going to lose by 20. Can you get it down to 10? And to look at those things and what are you happy with after? And then how quickly can you turn it off? because the value of me as a coach is sometimes not the value of me as a human. You know, there's mistakes where I'll get mad and lose it on a kid and because I want to win. And then I got to go look back on myself and say, well, dude, were you helping that kid, or was that a selfish desire because you wanted to win? And you try to find that balance in between. And so, you know, there's the coach side of DJ Connor, who's energetic and who's passionate and who's competitive. But there's also the competitive side that's a negative thing. And sometimes, you know, we'll get into it. And you find that balance of, okay, great. Then how do you separate that from when it's over? You go into a locker room and you yell at these kids and, you know, you tear up or anything like that. But then once it's over, what's the timeline on that? To now you got to go back and see those kids at practice. Okay, well, do they know you can get mad at them and give them a hug, and then the next day you're joking around with them again, and we're chopping it up, and because that's the human side. Because there's the coach side of DJ, and this is like the side, and then it's like, I'm there for you no matter what. When basketball's over, call me. Want to go golf? Want to go do some stuff? I'm there for you. So it's really trying to find that balance of like, listen, we're gonna stop this at basketball, but I want to be friends with you and your family. I want to come to your farewells. I want to come to your weddings. And so they gotta always know that. But it's hard because if you don't know me and you saw me coach sometimes, you'd be like, that guy's a psycho. You know, like I think I'm a pretty good guy outside of that. So, but the people who know me and love me, they know that's a passion thing.
Yeah.
So it's just fine.
I think that's the thing that shocked me the most about being a coach is the time. And everyone thinks, oh, there's the practice time, which is very real. There's the game day time, which is very real. But it's the 2:00 in the morning where I can't turn my brain off because we just lost. And I was like, what could I have done different to put us in a better situation? Why did I miss this scouting report thing, or what play, or how could we adjust things? And I just can't shut my brain off until your early mornings. And
yeah,
like,
they don't tell you that.
Yeah.
They don't tell you that.
And my wife, like, I'll slip out of bed and like I'm going and watching film on the game just to figure out what we could have done differently. And they just don't.
You know, it is. It's, you know, people talk about like the sickness in coaching, because the difference is, and whoever wants to get in coaching, you know, there's ways to make money. High school coaching is not one of them. Yeah. And you got to love it. And I don't.
Assistant high school coaching is also not one of them.
That is, yeah, to them, that's even worse, right? Because you can make a couple bucks on that. So, you know, my dad added it up one time. I think it's probably a little bit more than what they did. He was like 8 cents an hour for like the whole year. And so you have to love it. And I think what I'm trying to do better at is when it's family time, it's family time. And even when your brain is somewhere else, dude, your kids have to understand that you're there for them. And that was the one thing that I told myself when I was getting into it, not because I'm perfect at it, is I was doing this as a family. You know, I wanted my kids to know that I'm never going to miss anything. If I got to sacrifice 5 minutes of this or that in the high school to go over to my daughter's lacrosse game, my other daughter, you know, Chloe, who does track and cross country at Mountain View still, I'm going to be there. I'm going to show up because you can have your thoughts in your head, but you better be present. And, you know, that was something that is hard as a coach to turn on and off because you can't sleep. You know, that all you want to do is win. And it's like, do you want to win for you or do you want for the kids? And I think the best coaches, they want to do both. And so that thing will never go away. So you're going to still think about that too in the morning. Yeah, so it's tough.
With Mountain View and now with Orem, I mean, Orem's both historic programs. Is there anything that a head coach can do to get the student body involved to pack the seats a little bit better or to get more of a crowd there? Because the home court advantage is definitely a thing because we've played in gyms where they had it and we've played in gyms where they haven't. So is there anything that you've seen that could maybe help?
You know, it's a fascinating thing because, again, I talk like I'm 100 years old, but I mean, there was nothing else to do. You didn't have phones. That's where you went and met people and figured out what you're doing on a Friday or a Tuesday night. Now everybody has phones. And then the intriguing part is, how do you get these kids to want to disengage from their phones to come support the high schools in any sport? And one thing that we've always tried to do, and I can only replicate this based on the 2 years at Mountain View, is players, you got to be nice to everybody. You got to just, hey, I play basketball, come to our games, invite every single person. Because a lot of the times, and I don't know all the cliques and stuff like that, maybe they don't like the sports team, or maybe they don't treat them good, so they don't want to support them. So our biggest thing is you treat people really, really well. You invite people to these games. And then I think you do things pre-game to get people out there. We had 3 or 4 pizza nights where, you try to find a budget or a sponsor that can go buy $5, Little Caesars pizza. Hey, if you come, everyone's going to get pizza at 6:30 because I'm just hoping that you walk over here. One of the other things that Utah High School needs to change is if you want other kids from other students, and again, I don't know anything about these budgets or anything like that, but I think it's absolutely crazy that visiting students have to go pay to go see their team play at another high school. So change that. We do like a jersey night. I got a bunch of jerseys here that from Orem High, 10, 15 years old. We're gonna do a jersey night. And so you just try to do fun things. You got to get the student council involved. You got to promote it all week. You got to, have these theme nights. But you just got to make it fun for these kids. Do some giveaways at halftime. My buddy Puck, he bought some shoes, and somebody wanted a half-court shot, and they got like $1,000 pair of shoes. So those things are really fun to talk about. And then you got to be fun to watch. You can't be a boring team. Like you got to go out there, and I think engaging with the fans and having that. I think bringing the youth is huge. Like one of our things, and this is not every school. And if you wore your youth jersey, the View, you got to come because these parents, they got to come pay for the ticket. Maybe not the little kid, but you got to get them out. You have a little section for them, and so that's the one thing because these crowds are empty. And I can't figure it out. And so that's the one thing that's another thing on our list is how do we get the crowds back? And we want to be really fun to watch and have a really good 2-hour experience.
What do you like outside of basketball? What are you passionate about, and what things get you excited that are not basketball related?
It's funny. It's not basketball related, but it's sports. So we started a company called Real Athlete Sports, and it's all the way from kid to adults, and we want to revolutionize some really cool things. Kind of never let the dream die. So I'm really passionate about being active and really staying competitive in a sense of sports. And outside of that, dude, I love my family. Like as much as people think I'm a social guy, I'm a guy who just loves chilling with his family. If I can do that every day for the limited time I have, like I love doing that. So, going to a movie, going to lunch, dinner, those are my favorite things. I got some close people in my life, but they don't compare to my kids and my wife.
Yeah. What's a hidden talent that most wouldn't realize that you have?
I think my hidden talent is the ability to sit down with somebody and just talk, and for you to know I love you. Like I really, really believe that. And, I got the longest relationships in my life. That kid I talked about, Dan Henry was one of my first friends, him and his sister. And I'm friends with them 30 years, and we didn't talk for 3 years in high school because we went to rival schools. And you look back at our teammates, and 25, 28 years, they'll know they can call me and I'll do anything, and I know I can call them. So for me, my biggest hidden talent, I really will believe, is if you're in my life, you know I will love you. And I'll answer, I'll do what I got to do for you. I think that's a thing that more people need to do. Yeah.
That's a lot cooler than I thought, like a Rubik's Cube or something would be.
No, I don't have any of those things. My ability just to hopefully I love you.
Yeah. Desert Hills Basketball asked this on Instagram. I don't know if you know somebody there, but what made the 01 Orem team so special making that run to the state championship?
I know who that guy is, probably who asked that. Honestly, we had a really big goal at the beginning of our year that we were the best team. And we felt probably the only team that was going to be close to us was, again, Mountain View. We split with them, and we actually won our semifinal game and to get to the state title, and they lost. And from the very get-go, it started in the spring and the summer, we spent all the time in the world together. Everybody was positioned different. We had guys like, Chet Cusick was, the best guard in the state, couldn't press us. Pat Thomas was kind of ahead of his time. He could shoot a three from a mile away. And Johnny Harling, anybody who knows Johnny, and, was just a man-child. Fans would show up 20 minutes before the game and watch this guy dunk. Steve Stewart was, the best dude around. And then our JV team, I can't even tell you this, a lot of cool kids. They beat us all the time. They were so competitive and they pushed us so much. But at the end of the day, we went through some good and some bad times. But I think at the end of the day, nobody put themselves over the team. And as I was one of the captains, maybe I made the team because of my dad, who was the JV coach. But my whole goal was to get these teammates to just love each other. I would talk trash for Johnny Harling. That guy wouldn't say a word, and but we loved each other. And so what made us special is we hung out after, we hung out before. We weren't trying to rush to get out of things, and we showed up. Nobody wanted to win more than us. And what made that team special is all the way from the sophomore kid to the varsity kid, we made sure that we competed and that it was a great atmosphere. And I translate those things 25 years later, is we do things outside of just basketball. We go do fun things at Mountain View and with some of our kids. We've done, Halloween parties, we've done Christmas parties that we do, and I think that those matter from a culture standpoint. And so what made that team truly special is we played for Coach Scheide, who we knew loved us, my dad, who was the JV coach and the assistant, and all these players. We competed our butts off. So it was an awesome run. Unfortunately, the dream died that night.
Yeah.
So it sucked. That's why I got to win one.
What advice, so from the player's perspective, if you could put yourself back into a player's position right now and in the Orem program now, what advice would you give to that player to have the most positive high school basketball experience? Because there's only one team that ends with a state championship. But it seems like some go through their high school experience not living up to potentials, or it's not what they had hoped, or all of these different things. So what can a kid do to really enjoy the high school basketball experience from the perspective of a coach and a player who's been there?
I think that's different from every kid. What's your high school experience look like? Because everybody wants to win a state title. There's no doubt. Some teams just aren't good enough to probably ever do that. Maybe their high school experience is they got farther than maybe they should have got to. But I believe ultimately the greatest high school experience is being in a basketball gym for 2.5 hours a day for 4 months with players, friends that you love, developing relationships that hopefully last a lifetime, and then going to find these really big wins along the way, whether it's in life or whether it's on the court. And if the things that we did, even at Mountain View, those were massive successes last year. Like we because I'm a confidence guy, I didn't shoot the basketball. Like growing up, like if I shot it, my coach got mad. But it's okay. I loved it because I was on a really good team. So I kind of overdo it where it's like, hey, if you're open, shoot the ball. So we were second and made threes last year at Mountain View. We beat the Mountain View record in the season by like 35. We got to like I said, the quarterfinals, the first time in 10 years these kids got to experience. And so for them, it was a phenomenal experience. And so I think setting the expectations from the get-go is super, super important. I've set the expectation at Orem High already from now is we're going to win state. And that's really the big goal of that. And so the experience is now, hey, can we do that? And if we don't, did we still have a really good experience? Did each kid individually love his high school, whether it's a sophomore, JV, or varsity? And so I think, sitting down with these kids and finding out what that high school experience is matters.
What is the lesson that basketball has taught you off the court?
I think being a part of team will always go farther than being a part of just individually on anything. And so for me, I think doing it together is probably the best thing, basketball's taught me. And I bring that up as a team because that could be a family. That could be your brothers, your sisters. That could be a work environment. That could be your bosses, your coworkers. Do you guys get along? And so I think, as you translate that from a basketball to outside the world is, okay, if a team's going to get you here and the culture is going to be given there, can that be mimicked in everything else you do in your life? Can you communicate? Can you give the effort? We talked about that. Do you give effort at inside your house? So basketball has taught me that if you have the right team and you communicate, I think you can do anything.
I mentioned that there was a comment from a coach who had just got his first head coaching job. And so from your perspective now, going back to your first head coaching job, which was let's call it Mountain View, what advice would you give to that guy? Even yourself, if you could go back and tell yourself something, what advice would you give yourself on how to avoid maybe some of the mistakes or what to definitely emphasize?
I would definitely say be way more patient. Way more patient, because again, like I mentioned, you tried so many things and you gave up on so many things that you thought were going to work, and then you gave up on it. And I think understanding that maybe you might not win right when you get your first job is hard, especially when you're super competitive. And so I think the best advice that I could maybe go back is just relax, be patient. You got everybody else trying to help you. Lean on your coaches and trust. Literally trust that, dude, you need help. Because that's the other thing. It's hard to ask for help. I got 3 assistant coaches, a couple years ago. They did it for free. These are my friends. And so to say, hey, you're going to give up all this time in your family, and then I'm going to, need some help from you. It's hard. So, I think you just lean on some of the things and be patient, because it'll come.
This is awesome. Thank you for taking this time to chat with me. And it's fun for me to do these things because I told you I've never been in Orem before. And so I'm here in Orem now, and it kind of opens my circle of awareness of what's going on in the world around me. And so now, like, anytime I see the box score for Orem, I'll know you and your face and the team.
Absolutely.
And so thanks for doing this and the knowledge and the wisdom that you shared here. So that was super helpful.
No, I appreciate it. So thank you for having me on. And anybody's watching this, December 11th, Orem plays Mountain View.
There you go.
So hopefully I won't be as hated, but yeah, I think it'll be fun to get everybody back in the gym and start that rival, because we haven't played each other in 4 years.
Oh, wow.
So it'll be good to get that game going. So come out for that December 11th.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Coach.
I appreciate that. Thank you.